They brought Kiara Robinson into the courtroom like she was something dangerous, not with violence, but with silence. The kind that said, "You don't belong here." The kind that crushes you without ever laying a hand. She was 13, barely 5 feet tall, her wrists locked in steel cuffs, but her chin lifted. The courtroom of District Court 2 was wood-paneled and bitterly cold. Rows of adults sat scattered across the benches, murmuring like the verdict had already been whispered to them. Somewhere in the back, a bailiff yawned. A woman with a tight bun tapped her iPad without even glancing up, and at the center of it all, slouched in his high leather chair, was Judge Leonard Langston. White, 62, eyelids heavy with cynicism, a coffee cup balanced on a coaster like justice was just another habit. He didn't look at her. Not at first. Another angry kid, he muttered into his microphone without ceremony. Group home, maybe a psych eval, juvenile lockup if she keeps mouthing off. We've seen the pattern. A chuckle passed through the courtroom like a draft. Quiet, but sharp. Kiara took her place at the defense table, the cuffs clinking faintly. She didn't sit. She stood and stared at him, directly. "Your Honor," she said, voice clear, "you've just violated federal protocol in a Title IV-E hearing." Langston blinked, finally looking at her. She didn't flinch. "You issued a removal order without prior written notice or consideration of kinship placement. That renders your ruling procedurally invalid." The courtroom stopped breathing. A cough echoed from the back. The court clerk froze with her fingers mid-type. Langston straightened in his seat. What?" Kiara didn't wait. "Section 471(29) of the Social Security Act. I read it after you signed the order separating me from my mother. You didn't think I'd notice." The silence cracked. The assistant to the judge, young, pale, swallowed hard and checked the digital docket. His face went pale. Langston leaned forward. "You think quoting statute makes you right, Miss Robinson." "I don't think I'm right," she replied. "I know the law. Do you?" Gasps. Real ones. Langston's jaw tightened. "You're 13. And you're 62, still calling kids like me cases instead of names." For a second, just a second, Langston's mask slipped. His smirk faltered. He didn't know what to do with a child who wouldn't shrink. Kiara stepped closer. "I'll take the consequences for speaking out, but you'll answer for breaking the law." She didn't say it loud. She didn't have to. The truth, when it comes from the mouth of someone unexpected, doesn't need volume. It just needs courage. Outside, the January air clung like iron. But Kiara didn't shiver. A court officer walked her down the corridor toward holding, but he didn't touch her. Something had changed in the room. Something electric. She could feel it. From behind, Judge Langston's voice followed. "We're taking a 15-minute recess," he barked. "Clear the courtroom." But even he sounded unsure. Out in the hallway, Kiara leaned against the wall, her breath steady. Across from her, Langston appeared, his robe flapping behind him like a judge trying to outrun his own courtroom. He looked at her. Really looked. "You rehearsed that with someone?" he asked sharply. "A guardian? Lawyer? Who's behind this?" Kiara tilted her head. "Nobody. Just me." "Don't lie." She shrugged. "When you grow up in foster care, you either drown or learn to breathe underwater." He stared. "I read every placement report, every waiver, every clause they used to pull me from my home, and then I read everything they didn't want me to know." She pulled a crumpled stack of papers from her backpack, pages highlighted, footnotes scribbled in pencil. Her weapon wasn't loud. It was printed, double-sided, and organized by subchapter. Langston swallowed. "I don't care how smart you think you are, kid," he said, voice low. "This place isn't for you." Kiara looked up. "Maybe not," she said, "but it won't be yours much longer either." Behind them, through the glass door, someone was filming. 15 minutes wasn't nearly enough to contain the storm that had been set loose in courtroom 2B. When Judge Langston returned to the bench, something had shifted. The smirk was gone. The coffee remained untouched. Kiara Robinson stood again, no longer a defendant, but a challenger. Her wrists were still cuffed, but the silence around her felt less like control and more like fear. Langston cleared his throat. "We'll reconvene this hearing," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Let's proceed with standard procedure." But it was too late for standard, because the girl he thought he could dismiss had already cracked the floor beneath his feet. In the hallway outside, Kiara sat on a hard wooden bench during the recess, her fingers tracing the edge of a printed statute as if it were a shield. She didn't notice the bailiff watching her from the side, or the court stenographer whispering to the assistant, "Did she really cite 471-29 from memory?" "Yes," came the answer, flawlessly. Inside the chambers, Judge Langston was pacing. His assistant, Tomlin, held a folder trembling in his hands. "Sir," he said carefully, "there's a problem." Langston stopped. "Besides being called out in front of a courtroom by a middle schooler?" Tomlin hesitated. "She was right, about the federal code. And what?" Langston barked. "She's filed a formal request for judicial review. Drafted herself." On county letterhead, Langston's jaw clenched. How the hell did she even know how to? She cited a precedent from 2004. In Re TLR, she's asking for emergency reevaluation of her placement order. Langston turned to the wall, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "This can't go public," he muttered. "I've got press already sniffing around after that foster agency audit." Tomlin didn't answer. He didn't need to, because everyone in that building had already heard what happened. Kiara knew the system was rigged. She'd known since the day a social worker stood in the doorway of her apartment, telling her mother in a syrupy voice that this will be temporary and it's for her own good. She'd known when she was moved 3 times in 6 months, each time with fewer explanations and more suspicion. And she'd known it most of all when they told her she was too difficult to place. But being difficult, she'd learned, wasn't a flaw. It was a form of survival. The second half of the hearing was rushed. Langston barely looked at her. He approved temporary kinship placement pending further review, and banged his gavel like it could erase the damage already done. He didn't speak to Kiara directly again. But she didn't need him to, because the whispers were already spreading. The girl who fought the judge, the kid who quoted federal law, the system that blinked first. Back in the holding area, a young public defender named Marisol Reyes found Kiara sitting alone. She pulled up a chair. "You scared the hell out of him," she said softly, her voice somewhere between impressed and maternal. Kiara didn't smile. "I didn't want to scare him. I wanted him to listen." Reyes nodded. "He won't forget this." Kiara looked down at the cuffs still on her wrists. "They treat us like we're stupid, like we don't read, like we're too broken to understand." "You're not broken," Reyes said. "You're dangerous." Kiara raised an eyebrow. "That's a good thing," the woman added, smiling. "Dangerous to the kind of people who think they can control you." Kiara finally smiled. Just a little. That night, back in the temporary foster home, Kiara lay awake staring at the ceiling. She wasn't afraid. Not exactly. But the weight of what she had done began to settle in. Not fear. Pressure. Pressure to keep proving she was more than what they expected. More than a file. More than a statistic. Across the hall, the couple housing her, a quiet older pair named the Lanes, whispered about her over lukewarm tea. She's different, Mrs. Lane said. Smart, her husband agreed. Real smart, not just grade smart, sharp and angry. She has a right to be. 2 days later, Kiara walked into her middle school cafeteria like nothing had happened. Except everything had. Students stared. Some whispered. A few offered cautious high fives like she was some kind of rebel icon. Others kept their distance. Even the principal, Mr. Daniels, offered a strange, polite smile when she passed. She sat alone. Until one girl approached her. Small. Glasses. Nervous fingers twitching. Was it true? The girl whispered. What they said? That you shut down a judge? Kiara shrugged. I just told the truth. The girl hesitated, then sat down. My cousin's in the system, she said. They treat him like furniture. Kiara looked at her. Then maybe he needs to learn the law, too. And just like that, something began. Meanwhile, in the county courthouse, Judge Langston was in damage control mode. Emails flooded his inbox. A legal blogger had already picked up the story. Teen girl Cites. Federal law in court. Judge backtracks. His name was in the title. Worse, so was hers. Kiara Robinson, 13 years old. He pulled up the case file again. Read through the social worker's notes. Defensive, argumentative, unstable. He frowned. Nowhere in the report did it say, highly articulate, self-educated in civil law, master of her own narrative. Langston rubbed his forehead. He wasn't worried about the girl anymore. He was worried about what she represented. If one child could crack the system like this, how many others were watching? That afternoon, Reyes knocked on the door of Kiara's foster home. Kiara answered in her hoodie and jeans, a thick binder tucked under her arm. Still studying? Reyes smiled. Always. Reyes stepped inside. NBC wants to interview you. Kiara froze. No. Reyes blinked. Why not? I didn't do this to be famous, Kiara said. I did this because no one else would. But people are listening now. Kiara looked down at her binder. I just want other kids to know they don't have to take it, that they can speak, even when the room says, stay quiet. Reyes exhaled slowly. Then say that. The interview aired 3 nights later. Kiara sat in front of a blue backdrop. No makeup, no polish, just raw honesty. I don't want to be a headline, she said into the mic. I want to be heard. She held up her binder. This is what they hope we'll never touch. The law, the rules, the power they say isn't ours. She looked directly into the camera. But it is, and they're scared because I found that out. Backstage, Reyes wiped her eyes. Somewhere in a quiet house, an exhausted judge turned off his TV and stared into the darkness. In a downtown youth center, 3 foster kids passed around a printed copy of Kiara's transcript, their eyes wide with something rare. Hope. They didn't expect her to show up at the disciplinary hearing, but Kiara Robinson had never been one to follow silent rules, the ones that said, "You've had your moment, now disappear." She walked into the courtroom with a legal pad tucked under her arm and a calm that unsettled everyone in the room. Reporters lined the hallway. A quiet buzz of curiosity clung to the air. Inside, the panel of judicial conduct stood in a stiff row. Gray suits, clipped voices, neutral expressions hiding tightly gripped egos. And at the far end of the table, for once not on the bench but in the hot seat, Judge Leonard Langston. No robe, just a man. I don't understand what I'm doing here, he said, voice low but still stubborn. This is about one hearing. Actually, one of the board members corrected, flipping through a stack of complaints, This is about a pattern. That hearing just exposed it. The woman to his left tapped a page. Dismissive rulings, racially biased comments, repeated violations of due process in dependency cases. Langston's jaw tensed. I've served this county for 30 years. And a 13-year-old did in 5 minutes what no attorney has dared to do in 3 decades, she replied. Correct you. Outside the chamber, Kiara waited. She wasn't allowed in yet. But that was fine. She wasn't here to watch. She was here to speak. When they called her in, the courtroom turned quiet. She took the stand without hesitation, sat tall, spoke clearly. I'm not here to ruin someone's career, she began. Langston looked up. I'm here because if someone like me, black, poor, in foster care, can see the cracks in the system, then they're not just cracks, they're chasms. One of the panelists raised an eyebrow. Did anyone coach your statement, Miss Robinson? No, Kiara said. But thank you for confirming your expectations. A quiet laugh rippled from the press row. She continued. The first time Judge Langston saw me, he didn't see a student, or a daughter, or a human being. He saw paperwork. He saw a file. She held up her legal pad, filled with statutes, footnotes, and dates. This is how I survived. I learned the rules because the system was counting on me not to. Langston spoke for the first time in her presence. I may have underestimated you, he said quietly. Kiara looked at him, unblinking. You didn't underestimate me, she replied. You erased me. And silence fell like a curtain. The board ruled within the week. Langston was removed from the bench for patterned procedural misconduct. The ruling made headlines. But Kiara didn't read them. She had more important things to do. That spring, she was invited to speak at a statewide foster youth summit. She wore the same hoodie, held the same binder. But this time, the crowd didn't see a rebel or a case number. They saw a leader. I'm not special, she told the room full of teens, some in care, some freshly aged out, all watching with guarded eyes. I'm just loud in a language they didn't expect me to speak. She paused. Law is a language, and when someone tries to silence you, learn to speak louder than they listen. Applause rose, not polite, but powerful, because they weren't clapping for a girl who won a hearing. They were clapping for the possibility that they could too. 2 months later, Kiara received a letter in the mail. Harvard Legal Academy, Early Youth Scholars Program, full scholarship, summer immersion, mentorship track. At the bottom of the letter, handwritten in blue ink, the law needs more warriors like you, Dean MacArthur. She didn't cry. She folded the letter 3 times, placed it in the back of her binder, and went back to studying. Still more to read, always more to read, because the fight wasn't over. Not for her, not for the kids like her. But now, she had a sword, and her sword was made of words.